Okay, Algebra 2, Lesson 10.5. We are coming back to work with right triangle trig, and of course we have SOHCAHTOA. And SOHCAHTOA was a wonderful memory device that tells you which trig function you're going to be working with. S was sine. Sine was always the opposite over the hypotenuse. C, of course, stood for cosine. Cosine was the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. And finally, TOA was tangent. Tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. For number 1, a nice quick problem, let's just find which trig function we're going to use, which trig ratio. We're not going to find x, we just want to know whether we're going to use sine, cosine, or tangent. So here's our angle theta. What would we call the side with the 11? What special name do we call that? That's your adjacent side. It's right next to it. Right across from 90 is the hypotenuse. So we have A and we have H. That I hope everyone could agree with would be in the middle here. That's A and H right there. C stands for which one? Cosine. So we'd be using cosine. Okay, so we're going to use cosine of theta to help us in this problem. You come over here in the one in the middle. Well, here's your theta. What would we call the 12? 12 would be opposite, directly across. How about the x? This would be the what side? Adjacent side. So I have O and I have A. That's going to have to be tangent. Kids might say, how do you know? Well, look at the SOHCAHTOA. O and A is in that last one. That's with the T. So we'd work with the tangent of theta. Finally, as we come to this last triangle right here, we could see that 19 is directly across. When you're directly across, we call that the opposite side, right? And what do we call x here? No, that's not adjacent. That's going to be your hypotenuse. Wherever the right angle box is pointing, that's your hypotenuse, right? So I have O and I have H. So we go back up to our mnemonic. Where is O and H? It's your very first part of SOHCAHTOA. And S is going to stand for sine. So we would be working with the sine function. Knowing which trig function you're working with is super, super, super important, because now we're just going to do the problems that kids typically are thinking about when they think about right triangle trig, finding a missing side in a triangle. So we've got 3 in a row right here. Look at the 39 degrees. What would I call the 10 here? What do you think? 10 is the opposite, right? So we're going to have this right here is the opposite side. And having a little bit of trouble here with the pen. There we go. That's your opposite side. How about the x? X would be your hypotenuse, right? Now, if we went back, and I'm just going to jot this off to the side, writing SOHCAHTOA on the far right edge here, O and H is what part of SOHCAHTOA? The sine, the first one. So I'm going to write the sine of 39 is going to equal opposite, which is 10, all over x. It's always opposite over hypotenuse. Is everybody doing okay so far? Okay, here's what you need to know about SOHCAHTOA, guys. Once you write it out, cross multiply. Cross multiply. This is like the sine of 39 all over 1. And I'm going to cross multiply. I'll have x sine of 39 is equal to 10 times 1. And 10 times 1 is just a 10. And we need to find x to the nearest tenth, to 1 decimal place. I need to get x all by itself, and it's not, sadly. There's something right next to it. That's the sine of 39. How do you think I'm going to get rid of the sine of 39? You got to divide by it. Because whenever you've got two things right next to each other, that's implying multiplication. To get rid of multiplication, you have to divide. So first, some of you might not have been here on Friday. check your mode. If your mode isn't right, every one of these will be wrong, and we don't want that to happen to you guys. Look, mode is, here's your left arrow, go a couple spaces to the left. You can see my calculator got reset to radians. I'm going to go 3 steps down, hit the right arrow, and then hit enter. And now I'm officially in the degree mode. So I'll do second mode. Second mode always goes back to the home screen. And you can see I have to type in 10 divided by the sine of 39. And we're going to go to 1 decimal place accuracy. So 15 point, it's either going to be 15.8 or I've got to bump it up to 15.9. What do you think? It's going to have to be 15.9, right? Because you look to the right of the 8 and it's a 5 or bigger. So x is 15.9. And we're done. And we're done here. So again, find your trig function, cross multiply, and then get your x all alone. Let's take a look at our middle problem here. Here's our 38 degrees. What would I call the 19 here? The 19 is the what side? The opposite. It's directly across. What would I call this x down here? Adjacent. You know, obviously the hypotenuse is up here, but I'm not given the hypotenuse. They didn't give me an x or a number there. So I've got opposite and adjacent. Look off to this far right side here. Which trig function deals with opposite, the O, and the adjacent, A? That has to be tangent. So I'm going to write the tangent of the angle. Tangent of 38 would equal opposite, which is 19, all over adjacent. What do we always do after we set up our trig function? Cross multiply, right? We're going to do some cross multiplication. X times the tangent of 38, you'll, nice and quickly just get that. 1 times 19, you'll get 19. But I need to get x all alone. How do we get x all by itself? We divide, right? We're going to divide by the tangent of 38. And when we do that, you just have to finish that up with the calculator. We'll get the calculator up right now. Type in 19 divided by the tangent of 38. We're going to go to 1 decimal place. Looks like that's 24.3. Look to the right, it's just a 1, so don't bump it up. X is 24.3. Okay? Any questions so far? All right, last one of this sort. Look at this triangle right here. We've got our 64 degrees. If we go directly across, this would be the opposite side. What would we call the 14 here? This would be, that's adjacent. Opposite and adjacent. Which trig function is that? Tangent. Please understand, you might wind up using the same trig function twice in a row. So that could be a little bit of a surprise. Just wanted to show that to you. Many of you might have thought we were about to do cosine, but you can clearly see it's really tangent. What you have to do at this point is cross multiply. 1 times x is just an x. 14 times the tangent of 64. Wow, you know what, guys? This is kind of cool. I have x all alone. I don't have to do any dividing right now. All I need to do, plain and simply, is type in 14 times the tangent of 64, and you should get 28.7. 28.7, and we're done. Okay, any questions? Last problem. And they're even giving you a nice picture here. It's a word problem, but ultimately, even if you look at the picture, I hope you can see the picture's kind of telling you what's going to happen. So we're going to want to round to the nearest tenth. It says the length of a shadow is 60 feet. They're giving you this shadow of the building right here. Okay, that's down there on the floor. And the sun is 62 degrees above the horizon. And they want you to find the height. I'm going to call that x right here. And that's the real powerful part of trig, guys. You really can find heights of objects. And the military does that too. Engineers use trig to find heights and lengths where you don't even really need to measure. That's really a huge advantage. But look, I'm going to redraw this picture just to make it a little bit bigger. And here's what I'd like you to do. Look at the x. How do we define the x? What side is that? From the angle of 62. This is opposite, yes. How about the 60? That's the adjacent side. The hypotenuse is across from the right angle. Now, if you remember SOHCAHTOA, if you've got SOHCAHTOA, which trig function are we looking at? Tangent, the TOA, the O and the A. So I'm going to write tangent of 62. And you always have to go in that order. Opposite, the first letter goes up on top. Second letter goes in the denominator. So it's opposite over adjacent. And then here we go again, cross multiply. For every one of these problems, guys, we're going to cross multiply. Some of them, you're going to have to do an extra step to divide to get x alone. Do we need to get x alone right now? No, it's already there. You can see x is all by itself. All you got to do is type in 60, tangent 62, and you can see it's 112.84, but to one decimal place, that's 112.8. So this building is 112.8 feet tall, and that's the power of trig right there.